This is Chapter 9 of Irene Hunt's Across 5 Aprils. The deserters came in droves. The Point Prospect campground south of Rose Hill was said to be swarming with soldiers who made forays on chicken coops, pig pens, and smokehouses where winter meat was hung. In the spring and summer, vegetable gardens, cornfields, and fruit orchards were robbed. No one dared approach the camp. Even the U.S. agents from the cities upstate appeared to be in no hurry for a visit. It was known that deserters carried their arms and that they were desperate. For a neighbor to have recognized a face among them might well have been sufficient reason for getting a bullet between the eyes. These men meant to take no chances with an informer. The stories varied. Some said there were 100 men at Point Prospect. Others put the number at nearer 500. In the early months of 63, the theft of food was their only crime against the community. By March, however, a killing took place. There was a man known as HIG Phillips down in the southern part of the county, and the story came out that he had hired a substitute to go to war for him. That in itself was not uncommon. Many others in the county had taken advantage of this method of dodging the draft, which in the spring of 63 included men from 20 up to the age of 45. $300 was what it took. That was a lot of money. But once a substitute was found and the $300 paid, a man could sit back comfortably and yawn at the war news if he chose. There were men who were forced to take advantage of the system of substitute hiring because of serious illness in the home or the dependency of motherless children. There was, however, no reason why HIG Phillips should have avoided the draft, except that he was a lazy bachelor, much favored by his mother, that he was fond of good food and a comfortable bed, and had been known to adhere to the opinion that fools could do the fighting, while men of intelligence and property might take pleasure in the prospect of a long and easy life. He was not generally admired for these views, but the fact bothered him hardly at all. Hardly at all, that is, until one moonless night a band of young men visited him. Men who knew what gangrenous wounds were like, what marches through cold rain or blistering heat meant, while hunger gnawed at their stomachs or weakness from typhus or dysentery brought agony to every step. Men who had seen the dead piled high on smoking battlefields and had come to believe that the soldier of 2 years had done his share, that the burden should now fall upon other shoulders. Although there were many who held HIG Phillips in contempt, his murder was an act of lawlessness that terrorized the county. People realized that anything could be expected from a mob of undisciplined desperados. Nancy, who had thought of going back to her own place the following summer, now heeded Ellen's advice and closed her house completely, bringing her stock up to Matt's new barn and keeping her children in the comparative safety of their grandfather's home. Jenny was no longer allowed to drive alone to Hidalgo for the mail. No one ventured far away from home after nightfall. And as in the days of the Wortman trouble the year before, no one ever went to bed with the full confidence of security. The fury of the abolitionists and the Copperheads was now taken over by the deserters. One night in February of 63, as the family sat around the open fire, a wagon clattered down the road from the north and stopped in front of the house. Opening the door, Jethro saw 3 young men jump down from the wagon and stride up to the porch. "Is this the home of Matthew Creighton?" one of them asked. Jethro noticed the crispness of the voice. An upstate voice, he thought. "Yes, sir. My father's right here. Will you come indoors?" They came inside with a great clatter of heavy boots. Jenny stood wide-eyed beside her father's chair. Nancy and Ellen held the small boys tightly in their arms. Matt tried to rise. "Stay seated, sir. We're here to ask you a few questions." The young man who spoke threw back his coat to show his uniform and insignia. "We are representatives of the federal registrars. We are charged with hunting down deserters from the United States Army." Will you take chairs, gentlemen? Matt said evenly, but Jethro noticed the sudden paleness of his father's face. Thank you, no. We are here to inquire if this is the home of Ebenezer Karen, 17th Illinois Infantry, Army of Tennessee. It is. This has been Eb's home since he was a lad of 10 or so. Have you seen him lately? Why, no. Him and my son Thomas left together for the Army in August of 61. My own boy was killed at Petersburg Landing. We ain't heard from Eb but once since then. You know the penalty for shielding a deserter from the United States Army? I do. Are you telling me that Eb is a deserter? His commanding officer has reason to believe that he is, and that he has been making his way toward this part of the state. We assume toward his home. Matt lifted a shaking hand and covered his eyes. Jenny glanced at him anxiously, then suddenly blazed out at the questioner. We haven't seen Eb. He's not here. And I'll thank you not to worry my father with more of this talk. If you want to look through this house... We do, miss. This house and all other buildings round here. Jenny grasped the kerosene lamp with a firm hand. Jeth, you come with me. We'll show these soldiers through the house. They can hunt outside for themselves. Her anger made Jenny a very grand lady, Jethro thought. He'd never seen her more beautiful than she was that night, with her cheeks flaming, her eyes large and black, with mixed anger and fear. The soldiers grinned a little among themselves and followed her and Jethro to the sleeping rooms in the loft, then down to the kitchen and pantry, where Jenny took down the big key to the smokehouse and handed it to one of the men. We lock the smokehouse these nights. It's true there are deserters in these parts, and there's thieving around everywhere. But we're not shielding anyone. Go look in the smokehouse for yourselves. Go through the barn, the granary, everywhere you think someone might be hiding. After that, I say, you'd best go down to the Point Prospect campground. The talk is that there are plenty of deserters up there. The federal registrars looked uncomfortable. Yes, we've heard, one of them muttered. Jenny nodded. It is easier to come to a house and upset a sick old man and scared woman folk. Nobody in this neighborhood thinks it's healthy to go down to Point Prospect. But you sounded so brave just now. I thought you might want to go do your duty down there. The man who had done the questioning bowed mockingly before Jenny. We'll see to our duty, miss, and if we find Ebenezer Karen in this place, we'll take him back with us, and maybe you too. He turned toward Jethro. Will you get a lantern, young man, and light us out back? Jethro took down the lantern that hung on the outside wall of the kitchen and started down the path toward the barn. The federal registrars followed, laughing with one another. One of them fell into step with Jethro after a time. Is that girl your sister? Yes, sir. She's quite a little beauty. Jethro did not answer. His silence seemed to provoke the young man. I said that your sister is quite a little beauty. Did you hear me? She spoke for, Jethro answered shortly. The young man shrugged, called out to the others. I've just come upon some very interesting information. The beautiful little Spitfire up there at the ancestral mansion is spoke for. They laughed a great deal over that, and exaggerating the southern Illinois drawl and the backwoods diction. They made considerable sport over the boy's remark. Jethro felt his face burn with anger, but something new had been pointed up to him. Something in the long process of learning to which he would be sensitive for the rest of his days. Until then, he had not thought of his speech as being subject to ridicule. The soldiers searched the place thoroughly and then started back to their wagon. One of them spoke sternly to Jethro on the way. If this man, Ebenezer Karen, turns up, you know what to do. No, sir. Then you'd better listen. You get word to the office of the federal registrars in Chicago right away, telling them where the man is or expects to be. You fail to report him, and you and your family will be up to your necks in trouble. Do you understand? Jethro nodded briefly. He was deeply antagonized by these men, but he knew they were simply carrying out a job assigned to them. Anyway, he was glad when the wagon carried them away to the north. Evidently, they were not going down to the deserters' camp at Point Prospect. Not that night, anyway.